Hello and welcome back to D&D WTF episode 2. This one I'm calling the contract negotiation. So, in our second full session of our campaign, the party had boarded the train to Aluzi, where they were going to rendezvous with Alice's sister for the procession. This gave the party a bit of downtime, and our resident cleric of Gearmore, aka patron saint of bureaucracy, was starting to settle into his new role as appointed treasurer of House Vanderhart on the orders of Alice's father, Lord Vanderhart. Now, Goldman has decided to kind of lay down the law and assert himself in his new position of authority. As he's looking over the expense sheets, he sees that Torag's contract is due for renewal. And as is custom, if his services have been up to par, a raise is usually given. Goldman, however, thinks he has a plan to cut costs and maintain the raise. He decides to give Torag his 10% raise with an extra 2% bump, but to cut out the limb and life insurance policy from his contract in exchange. Thinking, Torag will either be too dumb to read the contract fully or simply not care in favor of increased pay. So Goldman writes out the contract in very confusing legal jargon and makes several good deception checks, honestly, to accomplish it. He then has his apprentice, a 15-year-old boy named Varen, take the contract to Torag and have him sign it. As Goldman, he's far, far too busy with managing the monetary affairs of one of Nirdheim's most affluent houses to be bothered with going and having a lowly mercenary sign a contract. So, across in the dining car, Torag's comfortably enjoying a meal, polishing his sword and reading a newspaper on the second floor of this dining car. It has this really nice glass dome skylight and these large windows for kind of relaxed viewing. Now, Alice is seated across from the central staircase in between them. She's drinking some tea and playing with her alchemical ingredients. So Varen is timidly just kind of climbing up the stairs and approaches Torag, giving him a polite, kind of cough and telling him that Goldman has requested that he sign his new contract papers. And that included is a 12% pay raise. So Torag takes paper and he's reading over the contract before raising a single eyebrow as he basically crits his insight check on the contract and notices the missing life and limb insurance. He interrogates Varen a bit before realizing it's Goldman that's written the contract and Varen has nothing to do with it. At which point, Torag crumbles up the contract, drops it into Varen's hands, and says, "Tell that bean counter to come and try and cheat me in person if he's got the balls." So he says this kind of while tapping on his sword, and then just goes back to eating his meal. Varen leaves and is headed back to Goldman at this point, who listens to Varen explain what happened before just calmly standing up, walking over to his dresser, grabbing his mace and the contract, and walking towards the dining car. Yeah, we all thought this was going to go somewhere good too. So Goldman gets to the dining car, and after being pointed towards Torag's table, he walks up the stairs to the second floor, chainmail just kind of just clinking all the way up the stairs at this point. And it's around this time that Varen's actually gotten a little concerned, and he goes to the party's really only level-headed voice of reason, Ray, and informs him that he fears Torag and Goldman are about to get into a fight over a contract, at which point Ray stands up from his workbench with a very long sigh and holsters his revolver before heading towards the dining car. So back at the dining car, Goldman has reached Torag's table and is explaining to him that as Lord Vanderhart's new treasurer, he has the authority to negotiate all contracts and, just thuds his mace down on the table. He kind of gives off the impression with this that he's willing to do this the hard way if he has to. Alice, of course, who is over in the corner, is having a pretty good chuckle at this point and is just on the edge of her seat, kind of drumming her fingers with excitement, watching this go down. So servers are going by, and one of them brings her tea. and she asks that they send them a refill of whatever drinks that they had, but to stop by her table first. And they do, and she drops an elixir of enlarged person in Torag's drink. Now, this is like steaming hot tea, so probably won't notice. So the two of them are across from her, yelling back and forth at this point, with Goldman haggling before offering to cover one arm but not both, and then asking Torag, which one do you like more? Torag, of course, is threatening to shove that paperwork straight down Goldman's throat. And about this time, the nervous server comes up and delivers their drinks. It's like steaming hot kettle of tea and a couple of fresh cups. So Torag, pours himself a cup, and just as Goldman is offering his half and half deal for the limb insurance, Torag just takes a big mouthful of this scorching hot tea, and then just spits it right into Goldman's face. I'm like, okay, I have Goldman roll for his reaction, and he nat 20s the save. So here's Goldman sitting there with like slight burns kind of like blistering onto his face, like from this just tea, just dead staring back at Torag, and just he says something along the lines of, "So I guess we negotiate the hard way then." At which point Torag gulps his last bit of tea, grows twice his size thanks to Alice, flips the table as Goldman grabs his mace. The two struggle back and forth a bit as Torag is having a pretty hard time swinging around in here now that he's like 12 foot tall, uh, and just decides to go in like punching and kicking. He gives Goldman a pretty solid kick, but Goldman actually manages to block it, but the strength of it sends him sliding back a good like 8 feet. Just as Ray comes bursting up the stairs, gun drawn, in this like alternate demon form that he had, which comes into play later, and rolling intimidation, which in that form gives him advantage. And he rolls pretty well, and he just rolls, basically comes like, oh, stop this shit now, and pulls out his gun. At this point, they kind of are looking at each other, and Alice is across the staircase, just dying on the floor, like just laughing her ass off at this point. And Torag and Goldman kind of give each other a look and a pause, and Torag says 9% in full insurance. At which point Goldman gives a nod, rewrites the contract, has Torag sign it, and in the end, several tables are destroyed. Dozens of people are traumatized. The entire upstairs of this dining car is trashed, but at least Goldman managed to save 1% on a mercenary contract. You gotta love that, Ferengi.